All right, welcome to today's lesson. It's on fire notes. So think of this as just being the same as being in class and me writing up on the whiteboard or doing a lesson on my projector. Um, it's the same thing, okay? So we're going to talk a little bit about fire because fire is a crucial part of camping and something we need for cooking. Also use it for pleasure around the campfire. It's a fun thing to have. Okay, so first thing I'm going to talk about is fire safety, and I think it's quite apparent that there's some issues associated with fire and its safety. So almost, I wouldn't say all, but almost half of all first aid issues are fire related. Fire, and I'm gonna say cooking related too, right? It just it just seems like kids get burns, usually burns of some sort happen. Okay, so if we got to bring out the first aid kit somehow, issues. It seems just common that fire is somehow related to it. So be careful. Okay, I cannot express this enough. Be careful around fire. It is potentially dangerous. Okay. That said, campfires campfires are important part. They're an important part of are important to camping, right? Um, very social time. I would not enjoy a camping trip where there's a fire ban on and we can't have a campfire at all. That would be very not nice from my perspective. I would not enjoy that. Keep your campfire small. The last thing you want to do is be responsible for a forest fire because you allowed your campfire to get out of hand. So we're going to say no bonfires, okay? We don't do bonfires. I'm going to say max flame height for me is about 3 feet, and that's the absolute max, okay? I think of it as, coming up to my belly button. If anything's going beyond that, it's getting too big. Okay. Even if we're using the fire to heat up rocks for a sauna or do something of that nature, it's pretty rare that we need to make a fire that's 6 or 7 feet high. I mean, once you start getting into that size, you can't even get close to the fire without risking burning your clothes or burning yourself. So don't do that. Okay. Be careful when adding logs or branches to the fire. This is a particularly dangerous time as sparks can build up and people can get themselves into, they're doing it and they're fine, but the person sitting across from them is not aware of what's going on, a bit of breeze, and all of a sudden, you have a problem where you're burning somebody else. Okay. Same thing with poking at the fire. Use gloves. This will be a second, next bullets, right? Use gloves when handling burning material. So sometimes we do need to grab a log that's kind of fallen out of the fire and maybe part of it's not on fire, sticks that need to be pushed into the fire. If you're handling anything burning, put some gloves on. We brought along gloves for that reason, and it can really make a big difference in saving your hands, okay? And the last thing I'm going to say from a fire safety thing is no games around the fire. Every year, probably, um, our emerge has some young guy usually end up coming in because something silly was happening around a campfire. They were jumping over it, they were doing something. So let's not have any games. We're not going to play with fire and take any risks, okay? All right, so the next thing I'm going to talk about is starting a fire. And there is a video on starting a fire. It comes after the note, so hopefully you can take some time and go watch that, or you will watch that. Um, Fire needs three things. Uh, Fire needs I'll use the number sign, three things to get going. Okay, so I can go like this. One that you must have is usually need a, a fuel, right? And in our case, the fuel is going to be wood, okay, or wood-based, wood slash, comma, I'm going to say plant-based. Some things are not wood, for example, um, grasses and bark, I guess, comes from wood, but grasses that we use, and sometimes even dried mosses uh, that we can find lying around are not necessarily wood, but they're plant-based. Everything's sort of a plant-based, and so it has carbon in it, okay? And the fuel must have carbon in it. If you're a chemistry person, you understand that that's required. Okay. The next thing it needs is oxygen. And where do we get that from? Well, we get it from the air. And that's why sometimes when a fire is going out, we'll blow on it, right? Um, Blowing on a fire is a way to blowing adds oxygen, right, to the fire. And we'll do that from time to time. Or we'll fan it. We'll use a, a pot lid or some sort of a material that we can use to fan it. I find actually fanning it works really good. Some young kids showed me this a few years ago, and I was like, wow, that's a lot easier than blowing on it. So I'll use a fanning system too. And then the third thing we must have to get a fire started or have fire is ignition. And what are we going to use for this? Well, we're going to bring a lighter. We're not going to start our fires in the bush using, two sticks and rubbing them together. No, we're going to bring a lighter, but we do sometimes in class play with the idea of using something like a flint. Um, and part of the course is to try and get a fire started with flint. And the reason we do that is that flints tend to be a little bit more water resistant, so we can use them even after having some really wet conditions. Um, and it's just a kind of a fun activity to learn to do. Okay, so we'll bring a lighter along, and you'll see that in the videos when I start a fire is that I always bring a lighter with me as well. Okay, um, what do we need, or what do we want to do to build a fire? And the first step, the very first step, so our first step is always to collect what we need to make a fire, okay? Uh, I'd say that maybe the very first step could be selecting a spot, but in Algonquin, they're telling us that we cannot do that. We must first um, we must always make our fires in the fire pit. Now, sometimes we do make a small fire for our little bug stove outside the fire pit, but this is not a campfire. That's more of a cooking fire, so it's a little different. So collect what you need, and the first thing you want to do, and is really important, is to develop a tinder bundle. Um, and what a tinder bundle is essentially dry, light, fast burning material. And in Algonquin, one of the best things you can get there is pine needles. I like to find also dry grasses. I find dry grasses work really good. Um, you can also, one of my favorite ones is to take a stick and rub it on the bark of a cedar tree and collect the material that kind of falls down, and it's light and fluffy, and it works really good. So I'll throw that on there. Cedar bark is another option that is available. And the neat thing about that is you can sometimes find this even in really wet conditions when you find a cedar tree that's leaned over and the downside of it is not wet at all. You can kind of rub a stick or back of a knife on it and collect cedar bark, and it will really work well. It just takes a while to collect a lot of it. Um, so then we will collect, it's really important to collect small sticks from, you know, eighth of an inch, 1/8 inch to 1 or 2 inches thick. Okay. And then once we've done that, we will use a fire starter to start the fire. And a fire starter is usually some sort of material that we bring along that helps us get the fire going. It will give us usually 2 to 3 minutes of burning time to help start the fire. Okay, and I think of this as a really important component of what we're doing. If we want to have a good fire quickly, having a fire starter just makes a huge difference. For years, we did not do this, and more recently, I have been using fire starters, and I find like, wow, what a difference it's made. Okay, so that allows us to sort of get our fire started. How to do that, you can watch the video on starting a fire and using the little bug stove, and um, that will really give you a better idea. You can see me go through the process. I mean, we can talk about it all day, but watching it online is just a much better process. And then actually getting a chance to do it yourself is even better. Okay, so I'm gonna it won't let me go back. Here we go. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the little bug stove here as well. Um, this device that I picked up a number of years ago is made up of, it's made of, sorry, let me just get my bullet set up here. So the little, and I didn't name this thing. This is the name that the guy who built it made up. Is the little bug stove is made of 4 pieces of stainless steel. And stainless steel. And it's fairly light. It's not really light. It's aircraft carrier, or they say aircraft quality stainless steel. So it can really take the heat very well. And it's fairly light and durable, and you clip the pieces together in a nice way, and you can watch the video on that. It's actually, there's a video on how to put it together in the camping kitchen equipment side, because it's considered part of the kitchen, but also you can see me do it in the building a fire. I do it fairly quickly there. Don't make the fire too large. These are fires that are only, going to have flames that extend, uh, 6 to 8 inches, 6 to 8 inch flames is all you need here. Okay, which is really nice because you're kind of controlling the fire using the little bug stove, and that allows you to boil water. Okay, so we use the little bug stove, which I should call the LBS really, to boil water. Okay, and all the fuel, all the fuel for this is all the fuel is collected in the woods on trip. And this is the real handy part about the little bug stove, is that um, we don't actually have to bring along fuel. So anytime we want to boil water, we set up the little bug stove, we get a fire going, and we hit it, and it works really, really good. You should always have somebody on duty. Always have a person on duty when the fire is boiling water. Sometimes we do let it burn out and the hot water sits there. It's amazing how long that water will stay hot, probably a good hour if the lid's on it, and we will use the ladle to use the ladle. How do you spell ladle? There it is, no I. Ladle to scoop water out. It's really handy for things like if I want to scoop out a bit of water for a coffee, for a hot chocolate, for some oatmeal, almost anything, even for our dehydrated foods, we can do that. But if you watch how the pot that sits on top of the little bug stove is used in the video, you'll see that it actually can be poured for larger amounts of water as well. Sometimes we use hot water for things like, just even doing dishes, like leftover hot water that's been sitting around after camp can sometimes be used that way. I like to see camps every time have some hot water on hand, even at night. Somebody wants to have a hot chocolate or something of that nature. It's just nice to have it ready to go. Somebody comes over, just grabs a ladle, puts some into their Nalgene bottle. I've seen kids do this many times and drink some hot chocolate out of their Nalgene bottle. I don't recommend you fill your Nalgene bottle, but even half full is good. And I've even seen kids take the hot water and put it into their Nalgene bottle. It cools off a little bit, and with the lid screwed on tight, they take it to bed with them to use it as a warming device. All right, that's the end of my note on talk on fire. Hopefully, copy this down, but if you didn't, it's always here to go back to and reference, and we'll see you for our next lesson. Also remember that there's two more videos, actually three in parts. The one video got broken into two because my GoPro just won't let me video that long, and I just don't know how to blend the two videos together. So there's one on fire and the little bug stove, and there's one on making fire starters. I'd recommend you watch the making fire starters one first, and then fire with the little bug stove. Each of them about 10 minutes or so long, 10. I think the one's a little bit longer, 16, 17 minutes, but not too bad. And then remember, you have to complete your worksheet or your questions on fire to just show me that you actually have, in fact, watched these videos. Hope you've enjoyed this, and we'll see you soon.